I didn't actually think my dad and I were going to die initially. We'd had a nice day sailing on Lake Michigan, and yeah, like frequently can happen on the Great Lakes, the weather had changed rapidly. The wind picked up, but that, for anyone who's been sailing knows, that means you just get a better ride. So we were cruising along in the wind, and then the waves started to whitecap a little bit, and then the wind picked up even more. And the sky went from overcast to black, and it started to rain. And the waves that had been whitecapping suddenly became 4 to 5 foot rollers, and we were starting to take on water. And the wind was pushing us further and further away from the marina. And I didn't really think we were in danger until in my head, I began to hear the song, Wreck of the Edmund Fitzgerald. But in my head, it was about my dad and I. The legend lives on of the overconfident father and son in their disastrous day of sailing. They could have gone bowling, they could have collected stamps, they could have been like normal people in Michigan and watched the Lions lose on TV. But now they're going to drown and nothing will remain because they'll be devoured by hungry salmon. So I looked to my dad for reassurance and I called out to him and said, "Hey, you think we're going to make it?" Dad was not reassuring. He said, "I don't know, but if we die, don't tell your mother." So, how had we found ourselves in this situation? You have to see, we were not a nautical family like the Kennedys. We were more of a wannabe nautical family, more like Gilligan. My dad was born and raised in the East Bronx in New York City. And so like a lot of city kids, he had these fantasies about eventually living in this magical, mythical place called the suburbs. My dad fantasized about one day living in a big house, having 5 kids, a dog, and a boat. My mother agreed to 3 kids and said maybe on the dog and the boat. And then my mom made a mistake. Actually, she made the same mistake several times. She kept leaving my dad at home alone. She went for a week to visit her folks in Alabama, came back, Dad had gotten a dog. Not just a dog, a Great Dane. Yeah. Mom, not apparently having learned her lesson, she went for a weekend to visit her sister in Detroit, came home, Dad had bought a boat. After this, Mom never left Dad alone for more than a few hours at a time. I think she was afraid that if she spent too long at the mall or the grocery store, she'd come back and he would have adopted 3 more kids. But the thing you have to understand about buying a boat, it's a lot like buying a gun in Texas. There are no rules. There's no requirement for training, no certification, no approval from the Coast Guard. If your ego demands it and your credit will allow it, you can buy pretty much anything short of an aircraft carrier. Which is why I still can see the color in my mother's face drain when she came home and my dad said, "Hey, I didn't mean to buy a boat. I just went to the boat dealership and when I mentioned I was a doctor, they showed me all these other options." Dad did not buy an aircraft carrier. He did buy a 45-foot Catalina that had 2 heads, sleeping berths, and a full galley. Did Dad have any experience sailing a boat like this? No. But Dad had read a lot of books. And at the time, we lived outside Charleston, South Carolina, so there was plenty of opportunity for sailing. Actually, in fairness, the first time we took the boat out initially went really well. We sailed out of the harbor. It was beautiful. We sailed past Fort Sumter, went out into the bay, had a nice day. And we saw a storm coming in. Dad turned the boat. We tacked back. We're heading back into the harbor there when disaster struck. Or actually, specifically, we struck an oyster bed and immediately ran aground. And my mom looks at my dad like, "What do we do?" And Dad calmly says, "Well, the book said, if you ever run aground, just jiggle the boom a little bit, and that will get you off wherever you're stuck." Dad not seeming to understand that those books were written for people who did the sensible thing and started with like a small boat like a sunfish, not a several-ton yacht. So Dad is jiggling the boom. It's not doing anything. The lightning is streaking across the sky. Fortunately, my mom was a Navy brat and had grown up on Navy bases in Rhode Island and San Diego, spent a lot of time sailing. She knew exactly what to do. She stripped down to her bikini, told my dad to hide in the galley, and then flagged down the first shrimper that was heading back into port. Eventually, when we moved to Michigan, Dad sold the boat, but he didn't give up his dreams of sailing. He bought another boat. It was a Victoria 18, which is a smaller sailboat, perfect for sailing on Michigan's inland lakes. But my mother had also learned her lesson. She never left Dad alone with either the credit card or the boat. There were many weekends my mother would come to me and say, look, your sisters aren't here right now. Legally, you are too young for me to leave you here in the house alone. But even more dangerous is to let your father go to that boat by himself. So if you will agree with me right now to go sailing with us on the way to the marina, I will buy you whatever Star Wars or G.I. Joe figure you want. Yeah, my dad's sailing was still a lot of trial and error. From him, I learned, watching, was that apparently one of the most difficult things any human being can ever do is to dock a boat, and that the buoy is the most important piece of equipment on the boat. But as a kid, you know, your parents' hobby is your hobbies until you're old enough to choose your own hobbies. But I eventually chose to continue sailing. Even in college, I joined the sailing team, which was honestly more of a drinking team with a sailing problem. And one of the proudest moments of my high school years was not when my dad gave me the keys to the Subaru, but was instead when my dad gave me the keys to the boat and told me I could take my girlfriend out for a day of sailing. And I followed my dad's example because I got her out to the middle of the lake there, and I fell overboard trying to adjust the jib. Yeah. But from my parents, we had a lot of great times sailing. And from my dad, I learned not only to learn how to sail, but also how to love it. The unique experiences that you can never have on anything, definitely not on a powerboat, of getting a strong breeze at your back, sailing into a sunset, your hand on the tiller with one hand, and then clutching a beer with the other. And if you're hearing Jimmy Buffett in your head as I'm saying this, then you know exactly what I'm talking about. But I also learned from my dad the sheer raw excitement of catching a 30-knot wind and being hiked over this close haul, hiked over the side of the boat, riding that out, not even sure how you're going to make it back to the dock, but not caring because the ride is that good. And that kind of adrenaline rush is exactly what had put us in peril on Lake Michigan that day. Because, as I said, the wind had pushed us far out from the marina. And it took several hours that Dad and I are trying to tack back against the wind as it's continuing to rain. We're taking on water. At one point, I'm standing on the transom of the boat to keep the bow out of the waves. My dad's bailing the water, but eventually the marina comes into sight. And I'm looking at it, and I look down. My dad's looking up at me. He's got this big smile on his face, and he says, "I am so proud of you. You look so calm and in control." And that moment I always carried with me, because just a few years later, my dad passed away. So that time has always been special to me. And we got to the marina. After only a couple attempts, we docked safely, got out of the boat. My dad hugged me, told me he was proud of me again. And he looked me deep in the eyes and he said, "And remember, not a word of this to your mother." Thank you.